Bizarre Reality Media.
What is up, Inquirers, and welcome to the expanse of conversational exploration into the fringes of social norms. I'm the one they call Shane, and today for you guys, I have fellow podcaster Justin Doc Brown from Prometheus Lens, here to share his discoveries after putting together the scattered biblical saga of Esau. Could what he uncovered explain the biblical connection to Sasquatch and other monsters? Well, I guess you guys will have to stick around to find out. Please welcome to the show, Doc Brown from Prometheus Lens. How's it going today, man?
I'm doing good, brothers. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely.
We've run around the same circles for a while now.
That's what I was going to say. Absolute pleasure finally getting you on the show after apparently we've both been around for going on about 4 years, and we somehow never crossed each other's path. And the only reason we somehow did this time was because of our good friend Riley. So we got to give a shout out to Riley over there at Midwest Mythos.
Yeah, the big fish, and we were talking pre-sales. He's or pre-roll. He is my ace in the hole salesman. I told him, I said, you could sell a ketchup popsicle to a woman in white gloves. He did a great job for me at the last conference we went to selling my books.
Dude, every single time I've ever been in a conference, he's like one of the only people that'll like help me out at the table for a minute if I need to go to the bathroom or if I need somebody to walk around with the kids for a little bit. So can't get enough good shout outs to Riley and talk about how awesome of a person Riley is. So again, man, thanks for hooking it up and thanks for making this conversation happen because I'm sure he's listening to the conversation.
Oh, yeah, 100.
So for anybody that may not be familiar with who you are, what your podcast is exactly, why don't you let them know a little bit about yourself, man, and a little bit about what you do?
Hey, man, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your listeners, man. But, yeah, I'm Justin Brown. I kind of got the nickname Doc Brown. And I tell people that I'm from the South, and we're infamous for oxymorons. We'll take a 7-foot guy and nickname him Tiny. So here you got this big dumb redneck Doc. Because honestly, I was just talking with some friends about all this different, stuff and deep dive research and stuff that I've gotten into the past few years. And they just kind of jokingly call me Doc Brown from Back to the Future, Professor Brown, because it is an oxymoron. You see somebody like me, raggedy beard and banjos play when I open my mouth. You don't think anything of sustenance is going to come out of it. But I'm just a 9-to-5 knuckle dragger, man. I've been a factory rat my whole life. But I always loved history and conspiracy and ancient lost civilizations, all that kind of cool stuff. And got into podcasting in 22 with a group of my friends, and it was just like a Bible study. Didn't know what the hell I was doing. And we were learning as we went, but it was called the Dig Bible Podcast. And we've done that for about 2 years, and we still do that now, but it's just kind of a hobby. We only do, 1 or 2 shows a month, but that sparked me into starting the Prometheus Lens podcast, where I get into all those fascinating subjects, but filter it through a biblical lens. I've been doing that show. It'll be, middle of this month, October, it'll be 2 years. And it's been awesome, man. Had a lot of good growth within the first year. I was top 100 in my category for Apple and Spotify. Lord really blessed it, man. But it led to me writing my first book this year, The Epic of Esau, The Birthright and Seed War. You can get that on my website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com, or Amazon if you want to give Bezos some more money.
Yeah, like he needs any more. He's fake sending celebrities to the moon or to space, as he claims.
Yep. Yeah, I tell people all the time, Bezos don't need no more money.
Dude, it's always kind of funny how things kind of fall into place as they're supposed to. Because like I mentioned, we've been around for about the same amount of time, but we've never crossed each other's paths as far as a podcast goes. And it seems like, ironically, as a lot of my listeners have kind of been noticing with a lot of my recent episodes, I've been finally kind of coming around to the faith where, I grew up in like a Catholic house, so I kind of got pushed away from everything. And with all of my research and everything inevitably leading towards kind of pushing back into the faith, kind of funny how right when that happens, all of these guests that I've been having on recently are all also followers of the faith. So it kind of just seems like one of those things that is, kind of God-driven and perfectly intended to line up. So I'm kind of looking forward to what we're going to end up getting into today, man, with my new insight on things, because I've studied all of it for years. I knew all the stories, know everything, but you get to a certain point when you're studying stuff that everything just kind of clicks, and there's just too much things that make sense. There's too many things that line up. There's too many historical events that make sense, where I kind of got to a point where it's like, I'd rather live in a world, believing that there's a God than live in a world not believing in a God, because at least, it gives you something to look forward to. It gives you the opportunity for like optimism. Like, I don't want to live in a nihilistic world. And my research inevitably, like I said, kind of led me to that point where you would think that with more, quote, scientific research, it would kind of push you away from stuff. But ironically, diving into things from a folklore perspective, philosophical perspective, psychological perspective, and also coming at it from a scientific perspective, like, it all comes to this root point that, like you were kind of saying in our conversations earlier before we started recording, like, conspiracy ends up leading to faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Because it doesn't matter which way you go. When you plug in the faith and the Bible, there's too many things that rhyme and connect. And I'm guilty. I am not a coincidence theorist.
It's one of those words that you just don't want to use amongst conspiracy podcasters, because it's just, after you see something so many times, like, coincidences just don't exist, And even before I got into the more faith-driven aspect of things, like, everything just lined up perfectly. Like, talk about, again, God-driven. I feel like a lot of these people, the plan, the journey is always a little bit different for everybody. Like, some people kind of just fall into it right away and it all just makes sense and clicks. Some people, you kind of have to take the long way around. But because you took the long way around, you've been there, you've seen the scenic perspective, so you can kind of bring people around the circle, which that's kind of what I've been trying to think lately is, maybe part of the reason of why I've kind of fallen to it when I have is because I'm one of those people that can say, all right, well, you believe in science, you believe in this. Well, how would you explain this? How would you explain this? How would you explain this? Where, people that has come from the faith their entire life, it's a different perspective. It's kind of like if you're talking to somebody about an addiction and they've never had addiction before, you listen to what they say, but you kind of like take it with a grain of salt. But if you're talking to somebody who's been through the addiction, they've seen everything on the outside, and then they've cleaned themselves up, you kind of get a different perspective on things. So I'm kind of feeling like that might be part of what, maybe some of the goal is that I'm supposed to be doing going forward with the show, is some of the people that are more science-based, because they've seen my journey the past couple of years. Maybe I can start kind of pushing them around the circle and kind of getting them around to at least starting to make some of these connections,
Oh, yeah, 100%. And honestly, it helps strengthen your faith and draw you closer to God. It helps you to better defend your faith. Because I talk about it all the time on the show. There's so many, good people, good, Christian people, but they're ignorant on a lot of stuff. But not taking away from them, but what I'm getting at is they've been in the same church for 20 years, heard the pastor preach the same messages from one perspective for 20 years, and they believe the things that are in the Bible. But when someone asks them, why do you believe it? Or how can you substantiate your belief? A lot of them can't, because it's just blind faith. And that's all well and good, but when you actually study and look and find how science explains God, that's how I like to look at it. I don't see a divide. I just see science as a way of man trying to explain away God. But either way, it's God. And so when you learn the archaeology, the science, and all the things to back it up, it just gives you a more firm foundation to stand on, better defend your faith, and then also influence and helping others see the light, because they see that you obviously have the faith, but you actually have receipts to show. And so those people are more prone to believe what you're saying, as you just said, because this person has been through this experience. They know what they're talking about. So that's one thing I've really enjoyed. I grew up in church my whole life, heard all these stories, knew them well, or so I thought. And then I got exposed to this whole supernatural view of the Bible and getting back to the original translations and seeing this whole new supernatural book and finding all these truths, to solidify my blind faith. So I kind of got the 1 foot in order, 1 foot in chaos.
I mean, that was kind of my whole thing was, as I was starting to kind of come into things, I realized that talking to a lot of people that have been in the church their entire life, like, I actually knew more about the stories and about the ideas than they did, and it was completely unintentional. It was through just studying all this different stuff for the podcast, and it kind of just ended up coming around full circle. And the other aspect of that too was like kind of like you were mentioning, the fact that people can spend their entire lives and just kind of blindly follow something and not fully understand exactly what they're trying to explain. That was kind of originally what pushed me away from it, was the fact that, you know, growing up Catholic, a lot of the times with like Catholic views, you don't really ask any questions. So when you start asking questions, you kind of just get pushed away. So, you know, coming full around, I'm kind of with you on studying the words as they are, which is why, you know, I've kind of gone more into like the non-denominational / like Protestant views of things. And also as an extension to that, man, we want to get into something weird before we get into the book, talking about spiritual attack, man. I'm slowly starting to set it up with the church that I've started going to about getting baptized through that church, because I was baptized Catholic as a kid, but my views, I kind of feel like it needs to be redone again just because of the viewpoint kind of coming back in and everything. But as I'm getting closer to that, I'm noticing a lot more attacks from other perspectives. Like I was kind of talking to you about before the show. I talked to a couple other good friends, Seth Vandenbroek being one of them. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him or any of the work that he's done, but you know, he essentially works for a church, answers church questions, studies stuff very like extremely in depth. Like if you try to ask this guy any question, he's going to give you an exact like biblical reference, like a bunch of different articles, everything about it. Highly recommend having him on as a guest. He's been on the confessionals and stuff a few times. But as I was like kind of talking to him about all this stuff, he kind of started throwing this idea at me that as you start getting closer to the faith, that's when the most attacks are going to start happening. That's when you're going to start doubting yourself. That's when you're going to start questioning your faith in almost everything. And that's exactly what I've been experiencing. So again, some of those things that it's not coincidence anymore after it lines up enough times that how else can it possibly be explained?
Oh yeah. And even like with me, was a established Christian from time I was 5-6 years old. Of course, I mean, I had my rebellious stages and I wasn't perfect, but I mean, I was in the door, in the know, in the club. But overall, I mean, my life was pretty good, smooth sailing. But once I started getting serious about the faith and started doing podcasts and talking about these things and exposing the darkness, yeah, all hell broke loose. I had made divides between friends, you know, lifetime friends, affected my marriage negatively, my relationship with my kids, just all kinds of stuff. And, you know, like you said, I'm not a coincidence theorist. All this stuff was hunky-dory until I started going out on a public platform talking about these things, trying to excite people to read their Bible again and exposing the darkness. So there was a preacher, I can't remember who said it, but it was beautiful. He said, if you've never met the devil face to face, it's because you're walking in the same direction.
That's a good one. That's true. Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show. Dude, you want to talk about some other stuff, talking about faith before we actually, again, get into the book. I don't mean to take too much time talking about all this stuff, but it's one of those things, I get it now, that they talk about when you start coming into the faith, you're excited and you want to talk about all this stuff, and it's hard to sometimes find people to talk about all this stuff with. But again, just stuff lining up perfectly. I don't know if I mentioned it recently on my podcast, but just for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to bring it up again. So as I was kind of starting to come into everything, I ended up sitting down and praying. This was the first time I'd done it in a long time. And I basically asked to have a good relationship with my son, because he's just been this just absolute crazy wild one since the time he was born. He's about to be 4 in December, but he's just one of those kids that you get him alone for 2 seconds, and he's going to be digging his hands in his diaper. He's going to be doing this, like just always just constant, always got to watch this kid. So anyways, I asked to have a good relationship with him. Following day, dude, it was like a 360 personality change. Like he's just been my little buddy ever since. So that was one of those things that, again, if I asked for it and I received it, like how else could I possibly deny that? And then a week later, man, I'm talking to somebody that I used to have a lot of issues with in the past because they were just an extremely woke person. They'd get me in trouble at work all the time for just talking rationally, realistically. And they finally started coming around to things. They're finally starting to realize things, and they were basically interested in starting to go to church. So I ended up hanging out with them because it's one of my girlfriend's friends, and ended up sitting there in the car talking about Jesus, talking about the Bible, talking about the message, all this stuff for about an hour or so. Driving on the freeway, man, somebody slams on their brakes. They skid over. There's like 6 cars, man. Not one car ended up clipping each other. And I kind of see that as Dude, we were talking about Jesus, we were talking about God, we were talking about the Bible in the car. So that was divine intervention right there, that not one person got hurt in that almost 6-car pileup because of the message that was being talked about in the car. Because hopefully with that, man, she apparently got a Bible from her sister. She's starting to go to church and everything. So hopefully that's one more person that kind of got pushed down the path of righteousness as far as I'm concerned, man. But perfect things lining up, man.
Oh, yeah. And Scripture even talks about it, too. It says iron sharpens iron. And a lot of good, theologians talk about, people will say, you are what you eat, but also you are who you hang around with. Les Brown loved that guy. One of the things he used to say is, if you are the most handsome or beautiful, if you're a woman, or if you're the smartest, whatever ist of your friend circle, then you need a new friend circle, or you need to reevaluate that circle and bring in some new people, because you've got to constantly have people in your circle that are better than you, because that gives you something to chase, to aspire to, and iron sharpens iron. You will be who you surround yourself with. And one of the things he said that I kind of stole from him and used it with my kids, I tell them all the time, you could be an eagle, but if you're running around with a bunch of turkeys, it's a matter of time before you forget how to fly and you start clucking.
Yep.
So only quality people.
I definitely agree with that, man. Because, you kind of see it, man, that people will like dumb themselves down to fit into a group, or they'll kind of clean themselves up to fit into a group. And as far as I'm concerned, man, I'd rather go up than down. So I don't know why people purposely like lower their standards in order to fit in with a group. Because at the end of the day, man, when you're the one that breaks away from the group, like you're going to be the one that grows. You're going to be the one that moves on. Like people always talk about this, oh, you've changed concept, but that's the whole premise of life, man. You're supposed to change and grow. If you stay the same, then what's the point, man? Like this is where you get into the whole battle of like good and evil, man. Like if it wasn't for good and evil, there wouldn't be a reason to grow and continue on. So it's like you kind of need those people, because at a certain extent, it's like you need the evil in order for there to be good. Because if everything is just constant, then there's not going to be that constant need to always grow and achieve and become better and better and better. So again, sometimes you need those people around to make you realize that you can do better. And hopefully each one of those people will slowly break off and start doing better for themselves.
Yeah, and we all need a push, because nobody moves if they're comfortable. Jordan Peterson talked about crabs. He talks about lobsters too, but one time he's talking about crabs. He said they're constantly growing, and according to the environment that they're in controls their growth. And they said that when they're in their shells, they grow and they get to where it's so tight that they can't get out of it. And he said it's very uncomfortable. He said some choose to stay in that. He said they never grow. They stay that size, and they're hurting because of their laziness and fear of not going out of the shell and trying to find a new one. He said, but the pain and discomfort of the growth causes them to leave the shell. And it's scary because you're going into the unknown. There's a lot of predators out there in the ocean, and you have to walk around exposed, vulnerable, until you find that bigger shell to move into. And it's kind of like that as you go through life. You have to be pushed. You have to get uncomfortable. That way you will move and be forced to move and grow.
And unfortunately, some people just like to sit in that discomfort for whatever reason. And a lot of the time, I feel like it's because people don't think that they can aspire to be something better. So they'd rather sit at the top of the lower echelon so that they can feel like they're doing something better. But not realizing that you're at the top of the lower echelon. You may be the lowest of the higher echelon, but that's a good spot to get into to eventually grow and get past that point. Like, again, people need to break away from that discomfort and just continue moving on and growing instead of sitting in this stagnant point forever. I mean, same with like hobbies, no matter what you're doing, man, like you got to push yourself to grow and achieve, because if you're always sitting in your comfort zone, then you're not learning anything new and you're not doing anything new. Like there's no point in doing it if you're just sitting in this constant spot all the time.
I can't remember that guy's name, but he wrote a book for men called Wild at Heart. And it actually had like a profound effect on me. If you've not read it, I highly suggest that you read it. All Men. It helps you become a better man and a better father. And if for the female ladies listening, it'll give you a really great insight on how your man's brain works, whether he realizes it or not, because a lot of the stuff he talked about in that book, I didn't even realize, but I'm like, yeah, man, that's me to a T. But he talked about how a lot of men in today's society are just dead inside. And that's why depression's so high. They just go to work, clock in, come home, go to sleep, rinse, repeat. There's no zeal to their life anymore. There's no more excitement, and they're dead inside. And he said that if you go back to little boys, when they're young, they are, wild at heart. And he said, for instance, boys get together, if there's sticks around, the sticks automatically get picked up and they become guns. And what happens? They go on adventures. They play cops and robbers, or they go after the monster. He said because they had great imagination and they had something to chase, an adventure to go on. And then also there was the damsel in distress that you had to save. So what he was saying is the three things a man has to have a fulfilled life is he has to have some excitement and adventure. He has to have something to chase. He has to have a villain, a dragon to slay. And then he has to have a damsel to save and have beside him on his hero's journey. And I was like, yeah, man, that's pretty well put, I thought.
Dude, that's probably one of the best analogies I've ever heard as far as like being a man, because it's hard to like describe in modern day society because most people other than guys don't get it, but it's like guys have a warrior's heart at the end of the day. And no matter what that warrior is, it's a warrior to some extent. Whether you're a warrior of truth, you're a warrior of faith, you're a warrior of whatever, it always comes down to that's kind of the viewpoint on the way that guys view things. So that being said, man, I'm always talking about this whole idea about in order for humans to grow, they need this like idea of like exploration. And I think a lot of that kind of just comes into the aspect of like, again, guys just need an opportunity to explore, an opportunity to be able to feel like a warrior at heart and have the opportunity to basically, I guess, like you're kind of saying, live out your own journey in a weird way.
Yes. And sorry, I was still listening to you. I was looking on my bookshelf trying to find that book because it's, eating me away. I'll just search it up. I was like, you big dummy, you're right in front of a computer.
Well, I'll throw in some numbers while you're trying to find it then. I heard this thing the other day, and this kind of just portrays how much of a message how much it matters that a guy has direction in life. I was hearing the other day that when women come to the faith, only 17% of their families typically follow. But when men come to the faith, typically 93% of families come and follow. So that just shows that if the man in the family, if the dad, if the figurehead of the house isn't driven, doesn't have something to move towards, doesn't have something to explore, doesn't have a journey to go on, then the rest of the family ends up crumbling behind him because he's, no matter what way people want to view it with today's society, like the nuclear family is obviously going to always be the best way for a family to function. And that nuclear family always needs that head. And if that head is dead at heart, then the rest of the family's dead and severed at that point too. And people need to kind of realize that and finally get that through their heads. And it seems like with Gen Z, man, I know that our generations have talked a lot of shit about them for years, but they seem to be coming around finally, man. Maybe it just took how crazy society's gotten, but it seems like they're the new generation of Christians. They're the new ones that are like anti-woke ideology. Like, I never thought that generation would come around, man, but I got a lot of faith in them now.
Yeah. But that book, it was John Eldredge, Wild at Heart.
I'm going to have to write that one down.
Discovering the Secrets of a Man's Soul.
I'm going to have to write that one down and check that one out.
Yeah, well, it's a good one.
Speaking of books, before we get too far in, of course, we have to dive into your book because we've already went on a million different side tangents and I want to make sure that we have time for it. So wherever you kind of want to start, man, with your book.
The book's called the Epic of Esau, The Birthright and Seed War. And just broadly speaking, it covers Esau of the book, and he's very enigmatic character of the Bible. You get just a very little context about the guy, but what little bit you do get in your 66 book canon is very strange, high strangeness, and it leaves you with a lot of questions and open-ended stories, and leaves you kind of wondering what happened or why was this that way, and that kind of stuff. But that main character spiderwebs off And in the book, I talk about Esau, and I basically lay out the premise that I believe that Esau is what we would call today a Bigfoot. And so then I go into the extra biblical books and Flavius Josephus, Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews. That was like a 6-book series he did, and the Targums and Midrashes, just every little thing on the ancient Jewish perspective that I could get a hold of. And basically it seems as though someone took the story of Esau and busted it into 1,000 pieces and just scattered it through all these other books and scrolls. So I just kind of went on a treasure hunt and gathered those. And if it fit into the Bible, didn't contradict it, but just filled in gaps and stuff, I kept that in the keep pile. And the ones that didn't contradicted the Bible or just didn't fit, I threw them over my shoulder and kept going. And by the time I was done, I had this perfect story that just interweaved seamlessly in and out of the 66-book canon, the biblical narrative of this guy. And it honestly was like a skeleton key. It opened up scripture for me. There were so many things and events that are centered around this man and the things that he done that goes throughout the entire Bible. It's just if you are missing the piece, you never know you're missing the piece. But when you finally get that piece, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is this and that is that. So that's kind of just like the overall arching theme of the story. So you have Bigfoots, you have vampires, you have this race called the Amalekites that comes from the family tree, and the etymology of that word means the blood lickers. You have Nephilim giant clans, sorcerers and skinwalkers, shapeshifters, all this kind of cool stuff in this book surrounding this guy named Esau. And it all started with a catty joke amongst friends. We were talking about Bigfoot, and I've never been a Bigfoot enthusiast. I knew the overall stories and stuff, as far as like reading all the books and watching all the documentaries and podcasts. I was not that guy.
Let me ask you this before you go too much farther in, out of curiosity. So when you started putting this book together, this was already after you started all your podcasts and everything, right?
Yeah.
So just before we continue on then, where did you kind of like place Bigfoot as far as like connecting in with like the Bible? Just, I'm curious where your opinions kind of shifted and swayed on this.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was never a Bigfoot enthusiast. For the longest time when I heard it, I just thought it was just BS stories, people making up stuff for attention. And as I started deep diving through this stuff and finding all the supernatural stuff of the Bible, it kind of changed my perspective and gave me this supernatural worldview. And then that opened up the possibility for Bigfoot to me. But like I said, I just never like deep dived on it. But when I was having that conversation with my friends, just Genesis 25:25 popped into my head. And this was a verse I'd read many times. I've heard the story of Esau preached in church, but it just hit me different that day. And for those that's not familiar, that verse says it was the birth of Esau. And it says the first one came out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak. And I was like, man, that sounds pretty squatchy to me.
Squatchy and almost kind of Nephilim-ish almost, considering the red hair aspect.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I never looked at it that way. So when I kind of had that aha moment, I was like, man, yeah, covered in hair from head to toe. Maybe he was the first Bigfoot. And I kind of made that joke to them. And call it synchronicities, call it the Holy Spirit. But I just had all these other little things happen, like within the next 4 to 5 weeks. Like God was poking at me or throwing breadcrumb trails. Like, hey, come this way, come this way. And so after that comment, I had Gary Wayne on the show. We were talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh. And once again, I knew the overall story, but never read it. So when I read it, I bumped into this guy named Enkidu. He was covered in hair from head to toe. He was also known as the Mighty Hunter, just like Esau was. And I was like, man, here's another one of these Sasquatch-looking dudes in an ancient text. And then that led to, a couple weeks later, the book of Jasher. read the book of Jasher, and in there it says that Esau was the mighty hunter, but Nimrod was also the mighty hunter, and it was kind of like a Highlander situation. There can only be one baby, and they had this battle, and Nimrod was said many times believed to be a Nephilim giant. You have those depictions of Gilgamesh, who they say is Nimrod, holding this full-grown lion with a full mane like it's a little kitty cat. So you have this Nephilim giant and this Sasquatch-sounding guy fighting to the death. And then that's kind of what got it all sparked and got me down a 2-year rabbit trail looking into this guy.
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show. Dude, even just connecting in some more weird stuff too. The Epic of Gilgamesh, you also have the Noah character in that one, just to throw that aspect in too. And also, I mean, talking about the whole Nimrod concept too. I had somebody on the show not too long ago, maybe it was like a year or so ago, named Robbie Marks, and he was heavily diving into the whole Nimrod concept, and he kind of tokened him as possibly being one of the first like skinwalkers too, just to throw in even another weird, more paranormal dynamic to the mixture here.
Yeah, I've not had an interview with Robbie, but I've been on some panels with him on the Occult Rejects a couple times. But I've actually tried to get him on the show a few months back, but he was like on a hiatus, like vacation or something like that. He said he takes a couple months out.
He's an artist, so he goes and he travels and stuff like that. So I recently set something back up with him, so just throwing it in there as extra, man. Try hitting him up now because I know he's home, but yeah. Yeah, he got into the whole thing about him wearing, again, maybe you can kind of shed some more light on this too, because I like hearing stuff from multiple people's perspectives, but he made reference to him wearing Adam's skin in particular too.
Yep, that's a major theme in my book, because like I said, you have this guy, but you have all these little spider webs going off, but they all connect to this guy like he's the linchpin. And what he was talking about there is the supernatural garments from the Garden of God. And when you go into the extra biblical books and some of these other scrolls and writings and legends of the Jews, it talks about these garments a lot. But when you go to the Bible, it doesn't come right out and give you all these details, but it's mentioned several times, but it doesn't go into detail because this is an ancient text written to and by ancient people. They wasn't thinking of us thousands of years later reading these things and kind of being out of the loop. So when they were writing these stories, they're like, oh, everybody knows about the garments from the Garden of God. I don't have to go into detail about that. There's other books and scrolls about that. Or I don't have to go into more detail about the giants in the book of Genesis. That's why they only get one verse or, 2 verses, is because everybody knows about the giants. We got the book of Enoch. No, we're kind of out of the loop. It's kind of like thousands of years from now, people looking at some of our text messages and all of our emojis. Yep. What the hell is that?
It's so funny to me that people don't want to take into consideration all the books that were removed, considering that you bring in so many other books to try to show the perspective on why these particular things are being said. So again, I don't understand why so many mainstream churches want to throw these books out when they're already bringing other things in to show context better.
Mm-hmm. And it's just like I use this analogy. It's like our civilization gets wiped out and America is just buried under all kinds of rubble. Well, 2,000 years later, a new population arises and those archaeologists start digging and they find the histories of America, this big old thick book, and it's the histories of America. And they're like, oh, here's all the stories of the Americans. Everything we need to know is right here. And then beside it, they find like magazines. They find Sports Illustrated. They find Cosmopolitan. I mean, whatever. I hope that those archaeologists don't take the viewpoint of the modern Christian, because the modern Christian would be like, everything we need to know is right here in the histories of America. All this other stuff is of the devil. Burn it. No, I mean, those magazines might not be the history of America, but you're going to learn a lot about us what we were doing, what we talked about, what we ate, our culture, many things that histories of America is not going to cover. And by reading those, you're going to have a hell of a lot better understanding of what they're talking about in that book, because it's current events and stories and things of the time. And that's kind of how I look at these extra biblical books. Dr. Michael Heiser said, something doesn't have to be quote unquote divine inspired to be important for history and for cultural contexts.
I mean, a lot of the stuff taken out, too, was simply because of humans, too. I mean, if you really think about it, I mean, you get into like the Torah and stuff, and they don't have the book of Daniel because the book of Daniel kind of leads towards Jesus being the Messiah. So they just completely remove that because it doesn't fit the text anyways. You get into the Ethiopian Bible, they never remove the book of Enoch. So all of these texts were all intended to be part of it. It's just a matter of human perspective has shifted out what they choose. They don't want to be viewed upon depending on which view or facet they're coming in from. And as sooner people realize that the only reason these books are removed is because humans chose to remove them, then they start realizing that they're not getting the full message of God because these books were never intended to be removed. They were intended to be add-ons, or, you know, here's the main book, but again, like you were kind of mentioning, here's like the add-ons, here's like the back lore, here's like the extra pieces you need for this main piece to make sense. It's like the side quests in the main book, you know?
Yes, I agree 100%. And so those supernatural garments, you know, back then everybody knew about them. And that when Adam got these garments, it was basically the sign and symbol of kingship and priesthood. A lot of the rabbis trace their beginnings of the priesthood to Adam. They say Adam was the first king and priest of all creation. That's why God gave him dominion. The first thing he done when he left Eden was a sacrifice. He stepped into that priestly role. And these garments were passed down the line, kind of like I'm a Southern man. So in the South, we have, you know, grandma's quilted blanket that her great grandma sewn, and maybe she added a patch or two to it, and then it went to the eldest daughter, and it just travels down the line. It's like a heritage thing. And that's kind of how these garments were. And when you get into some of these extra biblical books, it traces the passing of these garments. And it goes from Adam to Enoch to Methuselah to Noah. It says that Noah had them when he come across the flood. And that it said in Ham's going out, that Ham stole the garments in secret and hid them, and then give them to Cush. And it says that Cush, in his older age, reared Nimrod. And that Nimrod was the child of his old age, whom he loved exceedingly. And that when he turned 20 years old, gave Nimrod the garments. And it said that he became a Gibborim, the same word used to describe the Nephilim giants. And in Genesis, to me, that answers the question. That gives you the back quest, as you said, because when we get to Genesis, when it mentions Nimrod, it doesn't say that he was born a Gibborim. It says that he became a Gibborim. And the book of Jasher tells you flat out it's because of these garments, these supernatural garments from the garden of God. That's what made him a Gibbor.
I mean, just to even continue on with the whole fact that you need these extra books in order to kind of fill in the rest of the story. I mean, Enoch's another one, man. They kind of make these like quick references to him, but you don't really hear or understand the full story of of Enoch and how he never died but still went to heaven. But you need the book of Enoch to be able to kind of fill in that extra aspect. But again, removed because of the supernatural aspect of it, because there's clearly this big supernatural aspect of the Bible, like undeniably, but it's a matter of people just don't want to like acknowledge it. They kind of just want to stay away from that aspect and not get too far into the details of that aspect. They kind of just, it's kind of like the typical thing that everybody knows about demons. Everybody's aware about demons, but how often do you ever hear anybody talk about spiritual warfare or demons in church? It's just, everybody believes in it, but they just kind of side scoot actually having the conversations about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And what was cool was like, once I seen that, I was like, well, what are these garments? You know, what do they got anything kind of describing them or whatever? But when you get into Jasher, the Midrashes, and even the Ginsburg, Legends of the Jews, it says that the coverings given to Adam was the skins of the Nakash. And Nakash is what the English translates to serpent. And yes, it can mean serpent, but just like the English language or any other language, one word can have multiple meanings. So you have to insert the different meanings for some context and see which one fits better. But another meaning for Nakash can mean the shining one, or the one who practices divination. So I asked myself, what makes more sense here? A talking snake deceived Adam and Eve, or a divine heavenly being, a shining one, a member of God's divine council in the Garden of Eden, who they seen every day, probably conversed with, and obviously trusted, because she didn't act freaked out, because number one, snakes don't talk. If a snake would have talked, she'd have been freaked out. So it was someone that they knew and they trusted and didn't question, because when he said what he had to say, she just accepted it and went right along with it. And with that in mind, when you go to Ezekiel 28, that's a condemnation to the king of Tyre. But halfway through, the wording changes, and it's talking to the spirit behind the king, pulling the strings like a puppet, and it's Satan, because it says, you were in the garden of God. Well, this king was not in the garden of God. It says, you were perfect in all your ways. This guy wasn't perfect. It says, until iniquity was found in you, and you were cast from the mountain of God as a profane thing. And it's like, okay, yeah, he's definitely not talking to this king anymore. But it goes on, it says that every precious stone was your covering. And it lists these stones: beryl, onyx, topaz, jasper, all these different stones. The Masoretic texts list 9 stones, but the Septuagint lists 12 stones. Well, this is a Polaroid picture of the priestly ephod that the high priests wore entering the holiest of holies. And that the holiest of holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was, that was the presence of God that resided there. That was symbolically Eden anyway, because that was the place where God dwelled. And even on their veil that they had covering the temple, separating that piece of the temple, was 2 cherubim sewn on the outside of this thing that they had to part and go inside, because when Adam and Eve was kicked out of the garden, it says that God placed 2 cherubim in the east to guard the way to the tree of life. So this garment that was passed was the coverings of the Nakash, and according to Ezekiel 28, this was the priestly ephod. So I'm like, well, it's painting Satan in a priestly role. And not only that, the very next verse after it lists the stones and all this stuff, and you're automatically thinking of the priestly ephod. But if there's any doubt, the next verse even tells you, it says, you profaned your sanctuaries. So it paints him in a priestly robe, wearing the priestly garbs. It says he has a sanctuary, and that he profaned it and was tossed from the mountain of God as a profane thing. So I talk about in the book, it was like when the Nakash tried to deceive the new creation, his younger brother, if you want to look at it in the family aspect, when he tried to trick them and have them dethroned and downcast, it backfired on him, and he was demoted. So he was once the king and priest over creation, and his job title was ripped from him and given to his younger brother. So that's why this garment was so important. It was the symbol of kingship and priesthood. It was kind of like the crown. And that alone, I believe, explains why Satan hates you so much, because you're the little brother and you're the lower thing, but the family business has been given to the snot-nosed younger brother. And what he wore as his prideful, symbol of status is no longer with him, and it's given to the younger brother, and he has to watch his younger brother run around in his garments.
And then that would make a lot more sense on the aspect of why he maybe wants everybody to commit sins, is because he's hoping that maybe people will sin enough to be able to give up that title again, then maybe he thinks that he might receive it again. But I think at the end of the day, Lucifer knows he's never going to get that title back, but he's going to spend the rest of his time trying to attempt to get that title back. Hold that thought. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to that deep conversation you crave.
Yep, and see how those garments tie in with Esau is this fight that I mentioned earlier. So it says that Nimrod in the book of Jasher says that he built up hatred and jealousy and envy toward Esau all of his days. And it says that he basically goes out to hunt this hairy, quote-unquote man, what I believe that we would call a Sasquatch today, or maybe the ancients would have called a feral giant. But he goes out to hunt him like a beast. And it says that basically, long story short, Esau sees him, hides himself, and springs out in surprise and cuts off Nimrod's head with a single swipe. That he also had two Gibborim, two giants with him as guards, King's Guard. And he kills both of those too. So this hairy quote-unquote man killed not one, not two, but three Nephilim giants single-handedly in combat. And there was a hunting party, but they were separated from them. And it says that the hunting party hears the commotion and the screams, and that they come running. So after Esau does this, the book of Jasher says that he takes the time to remove Nimrod's garments, to which he prevailed over all the nations. So it gives credence to his power and supremacy and dominance to these garments. And he knew what they were. He stole them. And it ties perfectly into the trading of the birthright in Genesis. And that's something that never made sense to me. Never did. And for those that's not familiar, you get the birth of Esau in Genesis. It kind of fast forward to their adulthood. And the cultural context is the elder brother is the supreme. He gets the birthright, he gets the blessing, and the younger is to serve the older. So in Genesis, it says that one day that Esau come in from the field exhausted, and that his brother Jacob was making some red lentil stew. And that Esau says, give me some of that lentil stew, brother. And he's like, yeah, sure, I'll give you the stew, but you're going to trade me your birthright to get it. And Esau says, yeah, sure, take it. What use is a birthright to me when I am dead? And I'm like, well, that's pretty melodramatic. And it's kind of like, your father's a multimillionaire and businessman, and you're about to inherit all the money, the business, everything. And you come in one day and your brother's eating a bag of ranch Doritos, and you're like, man, I'm starving. Let me have some of those Doritos. And he's like, yeah, sure, sign over the company. No, nobody would ever do that. And his name, it says that he was the mighty hunter. He wasn't starving, Daddy. I mean, he was the mighty hunter. If he was hungry, he'd have killed him a lion, had lion steak for supper. So that didn't make sense either. But this book of Jasher fills in the context and the details. He just killed the king. He's on the run. He just defeated 3 giants, probably sustained some life-threatening injuries, and he's on the run, Daddy. And so it says that he comes home bleeding out, paranoid, looking over his shoulder because, he just killed like the president in our modern terms, and the CIA's after him. He's a man on the run. And he says, hide me, brother. Give me sustenance. Patch me up. And Jacob's like, yeah, sure, I'll help you, but you're going to trade me the birthright. And that's why Nimrod said, what use is the birthright to me when I'm dead? Take it. He was probably holding his guts up in his stomach and bleeding out, and knew that the army was out looking for him. He was desperate. That was a desperation trade. So with that context, that opened up that story with a whole new set of glasses for me.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, I've never actually put context into that before because, again, the whole birthright concept, like you were saying, it's one of those things that you hear about all the time in church. You hear everybody talk about it, but you don't really get the full context or the backing of it. And, unless somebody's actually willing to do the research on it, this is one of those questions you ask in church and people just kind of, "Meh, just pass it on. Maybe don't really ask that.
Yeah. And that's one of those things, too, is even once this happened, I was always taught that that was just hyperbole. That was poetic language. He wasn't really covered in hair from head to toe. He had a good beard. Or he might have been like your uncle, that's got that hairy back that you see when he goes swimming. But I'm like, okay, well, when you get to this stealing of the blessing, because what happens is he verbally agrees to trade the birthright to his younger brother. But I think it was, he was desperate. He was like, sure, I'll tell you whatever you want because I'm not going to honor the agreement if I live. I just want you to save me at this point in time. Because when their father is dying, it says on his deathbed that he called to Esau, the oldest, and said, basically, my life is fading and I want to taste of your game one last time. So go out, go on a hunt, prepare me one of your delicious meals, and I will pass the birthright and blessing on to you. So if he was planning on honoring the verbal agreement he had with his brother, that would have been the perfect time to say, nah, Dad, no, I traded it to Jacob. You need to go talk to him. But he doesn't do that. He takes off on this hunt. And it says that Rebekah is standing outside the tent and hears this. And he goes to Jacob. And she says, go out, kill one of the young goats, and bring me the meat. I will prepare a delicious meal for your father. And you, because he's going blind. And she said, so go in there and pretend to be your brother and get the blessing. So for those people that want to say, oh, that's hyperbole, poetic language, he really wasn't that hairy. Well, then how do you explain this? Because Jacob's response to that is, oh, but no, mother, I am a smooth man. What if my father feels of me and knows that I'm playing a trick? Then a curse will fall upon me instead of a blessing. And she says, just do as I tell you. And if there is a curse, it will fall upon me. Just do as I say. So he does what his mother tells him to do. And it says that they take the goat's fur. And if anybody's felt of a goat's fur, that ain't like, the hair of your beard or the hair on your arm. No, this is thick. It's oily. It's coarse. And they wrap it over him like a blanket. That when his father reaches out and rubs him, he's like, okay, yes, I know you are my son. Because he says, you have the voice of Jacob. I hear Jacob. He said, but I feel Esau. He says, but you smell of the field. So therefore, I know you are my son Esau. And I kind of told people, I'm like, I think that was kind of another telltale of the Bigfoot, man. I mean, everybody that has these experiences talks about the smell.
Mm-hmm. So also, just out of curiosity, so with this kind of connecting in, what would that mean for, I guess, kind of like an explanation of Sasquatch? Would that say that they are directly descendants of Esau, or would that kind of suggest the idea that Esau is almost like another like race or species, that there would be other ones of him existing out there? Because going into the story, of course, they were both they were twins. So I mean, like there's something weird about it. Like there's some special aspect to this like hairy being, but like how does it kind of fit into the perspective for you? Like how does it continue on? And I guess where does it even originally come from?
Yeah, well, see, I thought originally like maybe this was the first documented Bigfoot, and like you, I was like he was from a set of twins. So when I got to reading that account, once again, I tried to think of the ancient people, but I found out he was not the only one like this. He was not the first one even described as this. It says that Cain, in his going out, that his mark that he was given, and this is when you get into the rabbinic writings and the midrashes, the targums, and things like that. But it says that Cain's marking was that he was cursed to be covered in hair from head to toe and was given a horn. And that's why he was so scared of being killed, because he looked like this beast of the field. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in that story, says that God drives him mad, and that his hair all over his body grows long as eagle's feathers, that his nails grow as long as a bird's talons. And it says that he lives in the wilderness for 7 years among the beasts of the field and eats the grass like the wild ox. I think that sounds a lot, like Sasquatch. And it kind of seems like it's God's like calling card for cursing.
Yeah, like I was going to say, it's more of like a
bodies.
curse or something rather than it's like a race or like a specific group. But I mean, also kind of talking into the whole race aspect of things, they talk about the like inherit sin concept from your father. So could it be possible that the reason why there seems to be like a race of Sasquatch now could be that it's, again, this transcendent line of like inherit sin possibly?
Well, see, I think it's, and what they thought too was basically, long story short, Esau was a serpent seed. He was of the devil. And there's many writings that say this. You have the Legends of the Jews. You have the Targums and Midrashes, the rabbinic writings, the Targums of Jonathan. A lot of people kind of want to poo-poo on that because it is supernatural, and it's a little different from the English translations from the Masoretic text, but these predate the Septuagint. This, especially like the Targum of Jonathan, that was the very first translation from the original Hebrew. And it's not a direct word for word translation. It's a translation, but the writer threw in like his opinions, kind of like a commentary. But I'm just like, if I was going to get a commentary at all on this ancient text, I'd want it to be from a rabbi who lived during that time and had a good grip on the culture and the histories and legends of the people of that time. But it says that Esau come out with a serpent's branding on his body. It also says that Jacob had a guardian angel, that his guardian angel was Gabriel. But it said that Esau also had a guardian angel, and his guardian angel was Samael. And according to legends, this was the name of the Nakash before he was kicked out of Eden. And he was known as the Viper of God, the angel of death. And that's why Esau was this mighty hunter. And this was, according to my theory, this symbol of kingship and priesthood was once the garments of the Nakash. So, of course, he would want his seed to get those garments back and get the garments back in his family line and his seed's line. And the ancient reader, when you read the book of Genesis, it says that the first one come out red, covered in hair from head to toe, like a hairy cloak. And it says that the second one came out, Jacob, and he was clutching the heel of Esau. And the angel of the Lord, before the birth came, she was in great travail, like they were fighting in the womb. And so she prays to the Lord, and the Lord tells her, he said, 2 nations, 2 peoples are in your womb, and they battle together, and there will be enmity between the 2. Well, this is in Genesis. This is just a few chapters away from the curse of the garden and them being kicked out of the garden. So, and they use that word enmity. So they're pointing back to the garden, because what happens there, God gives the cursings to mankind and the Nakash. And what does he say? He says, I'm going to put enmity between her seed and thy seed, talking to the serpent, the Nakash. So it says plainly right there, she's going to have a seed, he's going to have a seed, and they're going to be at war with each other, enmity with each other. And that one would bruise one's head, and the other would bruise the heel. So when we look at the birth of Jacob and Esau, this is a few chapters away from that event. This would have been fresh on their minds. And when it describes the birth, first one come out red, covered in hair from head to toe like a hairy cloak. So his foot had to basically push on Jacob's head, metaphorically or even probably literally, bruising the head to exit the womb. And then here's Jacob clutching the heel, bruising the heel. You could not get a more Polaroid picture image of Genesis 3:15. And I think that would have been on the very forefront of the ancient reader's mind.
So then the matter of having these two purposely split, like where would these two nations, well, obviously we know where one nation ends up going, but where do you think that the other nation ends up going? Do you think this kind of leads into some of the more modern Sasquatch stuff that, I don't want to say people think that it's more of like a demonic thing, but I guess kind of viewing it from this context, maybe the whole Sasquatch thing is more of a demonic thing, aside from the whole like Nephilim context that people like to throw on it.
Mm-hmm. Well, see, he comes out covered in hair and looking just like all the fertility gods of that region. There's a million of them. And honestly, I think the Epic of Gilgamesh is basically another retelling of this battle between Esau and Nimrod. But that is the Hebrew version. And then when you get to Mesopotamia, that is their version because it's identical. You have this mighty hunter, and you have this other mighty hunter that's covered in hair. They're jealous of one another. They battle. But in the Mesopotamian version, it says that Nimrod wins, and they become good friends and go on these epic journeys together. Where the Hebrew version has their guy winning and defeating Nimrod. But when you get into the Epic of Gilgamesh, because this is the same region, it says that Enkidu was created by Enki, but he was created in the image of Samquain. And Samquain was a fertility god covered in hair from head to toe. And here you have Esau coming out looking just like these hairy fertility gods. And what's really wild is how the Nephilim giants tie into this. I think when you get fallen angels, the Nakash interbreeding with the daughters of men, like Genesis 6 says, I think it's like a mutation in God's perfect creation. And I think it manifests in many different ways. I think that's why we have elongated skulls. I think that's why we have giants. I think that's why we have Bigfoot, werewolf, vampire, all these different kind of things, because it is a mutation, something that's not supposed to be there, inserted into the DNA, and it manifests in all these random mutations. But Esau, once he comes back home and tries to give his father the meal and realizes the fix was up, because he said, "Arise, father, eat your meal." He says, "I've already give you your blessing." He's like, "No, you didn't, father." And he realizes that Jacob deceived him. And he's crying, he's upset. And he's like, "Well, father, do you have another blessing? Can you give me half of the inheritance? We'll just split it." And he's like, "No, what's done is done. Your brother's got everything now." And he gets mad, threatens to kill his brother, and his mother sends him away to the land of Haran to hide, basically, until Esau's wrath subsides. But here is basically where Esau gives the middle finger. He goes into full rebellion. And he takes 3 wives. And thanks to people like Gary Wayne, they did an excellent job diving through the genealogies. And granted, a lot of us skip over that because it's boring. This one begot this one, lived 120 years, went to be with their ancestors. But through his work and diving through that, he found out that 2 of the brides that he took were Canaanites, which God's people were told not to take wives from. But one was a Horite and one was a Hivite. And both of those were known Nephilim giant clans. And it mentions his father-in-law in the book of Genesis as Seir. And that Seir ruled from the land of Mount Seir. And when you get into the etymology of that word, that means hairy. So here you have this hairy, quote-unquote, man, Esau, marrying into Nephilim giant clans, and one of the clans is led by this ruler named Seir, which means hairy. So you have these hairy feral giants interbreeding with Esau. I mean, I think that's a pretty high likelihood for some really strange pups, to say the least.
Hold on tight, guys. We'll be right back after this brief commercial break. And now back to the show.
But when you follow the genealogies through this interbreeding, burst the Amalekite race that comes from Esau's loins, from interbreeding with these Horites and Hivites. And once again, etymology is so important. When you go to the etymology of the Amalekites, that means the blood lickers. And these people were known to be very fierce warriors and gigantic. And they drank the blood, obviously, and they were cannibals because their name means the blood licker. So it's got like this whole vampiristic feel to it. And they were known sorcerers. They passed their children through the fires of Molech. I'm trying to think. And then Rashi, the medieval rabbi, in his writings even comes out and says that the Amalekites were known shapeshifters. So they were sorcerers, they were shapeshifters, they were cannibals, mighty fierce warriors. And that you get all those commandments in the Bible. You know, don't pass your children through the fire. Don't sacrifice to the hairy goat demons. Don't seek necromancers and sorcerers. Just all these things that this group of people were participating in and practicing. So I think it's really telling, to say the least, when you take a closer look at these people.
So are you kind of suggesting almost that where we get a lot of these factions of phenomenon, I guess you could say, for lack of a better term, end up being created because of essentially this guy birthing these different groups, and then these different groups basically become the sub-variations of these different types of creatures? Is that kind of how you're kind of viewing it?
Yeah, I see it like that. And also, like I said, it's mutations are random. So it's like when they done that, some of them manifested in different ways, but it all stemmed from this original, mutation and corruption.
And then if they're reproducing in that group, it'll just kind of continue on that specific feature. So, if you have this group that kind of takes on this more vampiristic view of things, then they're kind of reproducing amongst each other and they kind of isolate that, so to speak. And this group, that are more of like the feral Sasquatch types, they're reproducing amongst the feral Sasquatch types, and then they're kind of just isolating that type of group. Is that kind of how you're describing it?
Yeah, I think so. And then a lot of people want to talk about, if they're flesh and blood, like you're saying, then how do you explain all the woo? A lot of people talk about the aliens. They see aliens sometimes, and they see the orb phenomenon, the infrasound, phasing in and out of reality, and all this kind of stuff. So I tell people, I try to look at things from multiple different angles. Do I think that there is a physical remnant left? I think it's a high possibility. You get the stories of the Kandahar giant. He come out of a cave. He was covered in hair and red hair. There was even two
semi-recently from, Colorado was one of them. And then there was another one, I think where was that? Like Nevada or something, that people were seeing those split cave openings. So, these are something that's kind of seen primarily in the Middle East, but a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah. And so these guys are cave dwellers, and they're traveling around under the ground.
And that gets into some South American stuff too, because I'm sure you've probably talked to Tim Alberino about all of his stuff with the giants down in South America and these underground passages. So just to throw it in, just another connection that kind of leads into world folklore.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what continent you go to. They all have stories of the wild man, these hairy men and dwelling in caves and things like that. But I tell people that want to kind of poo-poo on it and say, well, if there really is a Sasquatch or whatever, we would have found one by now, or we would have killed one or captured one by now. And I try to remind people, I'm like, well, look at the panda. And everybody's like, well, what about the panda? I was like, it was only discovered in the last 100 years. Anybody who's been around a panda, they're stupid animals. But there was legends and lore and stories about these white and black bears of the woods. And all the Chinese and Japanese people that this originated from looked at it as we look at Bigfoot today. Oh, that ain't real. That's old wise tale to keep kids from wandering too far from home. No, that's a legend. That ain't real. And it avoided capture and being killed for thousands of years. And they're a dumb animal. So if you look at the Sasquatch, the feral giant, this is the ultimate predator. The Bible describes them as the mighty hunters. So this is a humanoid creature with intelligence. So that's why I think it's not, out of the realm of possibility that they would be avoiding being captured and seen. And then I think there's also a demonic spiritual side to it. And that's where all the woo comes from, in my opinion, because they interbred with Nephilim giants, right? And we know from the book of Enoch, it says that the Nephilim giants, they were neither of heaven or of earth. So their souls had nowhere to go. And that when they died, their spirits remained on earth to torment mankind. And just as I said earlier, these Amalekites, they were known sorcerers. They were known shapeshifters. They drank the blood, all these things.
I mean, you even mentioned necromancer specifically. So, I mean, that just kind of continues on right down that lane.
So if they die, would it be out of the question that these spirits would want to take a familiar form? I don't think so.
I mean, just even another weird aspect to think. I mean, whether or not these things are physical is a debate that's been going on with Sasquatchers forever. But, I mean, if you're looking at them from that viewpoint, I mean, who's to even say that these things are physical in the sense that we think that, if these things die, do they actually die if their souls or their existence doesn't go anywhere? I mean, these things could essentially basically just not die. I mean, that's another weird way of thinking about it. Like, these things might just be something that's existing in this perpetuating, infinite, timeless existence, for lack of better terms. That it's not like they're 100 years old, 200 years old. Like, they're just disembodied beings that are just walking across the earth, and they just that's why you never find a body. It's just because they don't die.
Yeah.
Or I mean, looking at the two sides of it,
you can't speak in absolutes. There's too many unknowns to speak in absolutes.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But I mean, even continuing on with this, I mean, this completely would describe the whole idea that when people get into like the DNA of Sasquatch, they have this unknown male and then they have female human. I mean, everybody kind of connects that in with the whole Nephilim concept. And what your theory is just kind of somewhat of an extension of that. But I mean, I feel like that could also even show some scientific backing to show some validity to this too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And one thing too I talked about in the book is I dived into what does the scientists, what does the science have to say about this, if anything? Because a lot of people, when they hear Bigfoot, it's like this cognitive dissonance, or they think of all this sensational Hollywood stuff. They're like, oh, that ain't real, and don't even look any further. But when you look, there's a condition called hypertrichosis. And it says that basically, and I never knew this, but we are all covered in hair in the womb. And that at a certain trimester or point, the DNA tells you to shed that hair before you're born. And I think they call it Lugano hair. And basically, there's people born that are covered in hair from head to toe, like Esau's described in the Bible. And they call it hypertrichosis. And they say it's like a genetic malfunction, that when they're in the womb, the body doesn't tell them to shed the hair, and that they come out covered in hair. And there's been thousands of people historically documented with this condition. Here's where you get your wolf man from these circus sideshow freaks. Here's where you get the bearded lady and those type of stories. Here's where you get all those legends of the wild men and feral people of the woods. Because think of ancient times, a kid born like this would have been labeled a demon baby. They'd have killed it or took it to the woods and laid it for the wolves to get. So if something, found it, raised it, it grew up to be an adult, it started breeding just like the homeless population. There's power in numbers. They started breeding with each other, reproducing more of these hairy, feral people. And that's where you get all these legends, especially in Europe, of these wild men and women raiding towns because they're trying to survive. They're looking for food and supplies, and you can hear about them stealing women and breeding with the women. They coming back and breeding and giving birth to these hairy demon children.
Man, I know I mentioned it a lot earlier in the show, but you really, really need to talk to Seth Vandenbroek, because he kind of put together this I guess you could say partial theory, but kind of coming around to somewhat of the same conclusions as you. He kind of started diving into a lot of these creatures from like the Greek perspective, talking about like satyrs and talking about things that the hair, like the dogmen's or the dogman and everything like that. What's the old term for those?
Do they call them satyrs?
No. For the dogmen, it was
oh shoot, I don't know.
Some cytochem, something like that. But anyways, he kind of gets into this whole theory talking about how a lot of these traits that we see now seem to be these monster race traits, but they're on a lesser scale, almost like they're kind of starting to like dwindle down within the genetics.
The DNA strand gets weaker and weaker as they interbreed and time goes. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, he kind of came around to it, same point that you are, but diving into it from a couple different perspectives of different creatures and stuff. But yeah, dude, I'd recommend having him on your show to kind of break it down a little bit. But I mean, it definitely makes sense that if you're getting into this whole idea about Nephilim, the altered DNA concept, unless it's being refreshed, then there is going to be this like slow dwindle down. And of course, you get into this whole thing about all these like elites and these different groups trying to keep their bloodlines pure. This might be the reasoning behind it, is because these monster race traits are starting to dwindle down. And I'm sure some of the intention is that if you have direct bloodline relation to these things, that's something that you're probably more proud of than scared of. So they're trying to keep these races, these traits, these things in a specific group, because everybody else it's kind of slowly starting to dwindle out of. Because I mean, primarily
the Dragon Court.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you see now, I mean, where's the majority of it coming from? For whatever reason, it's like South America. That seems to be in India. Those are like the two places that you see these monster race traits come out the most. I mean, especially the whole thing with people being covered in hair. I mean, you see obviously all the Sasquatch stuff all around the world, but typically when you're seeing it from a medical perspective, a lot of that stuff's coming from South America for whatever reason, which also has the elongated skulls and a lot of these other genetics that seem like they're kind of dwindling out later than they did in the rest of the world.
Yeah, and another thing too is I found out that this is like I said, we're all born with this hair, or we're conceived in the womb and have this hair. It's just at a certain time we're told to shed the hair. Well, there's so it shows you that is built into the DNA, and it goes back, I think, to the corruption of the image of God in Genesis. But it says that they have studied and shown that when the body goes into anorexia, starvation mode, and you are out into the wilderness and in the elements, especially the cold, that your fat, works as an insulation. It keeps you warm. And so when you're in anorexia mode, you've burned up all your fat for fuel, and you're basically just skin and bones. So you have no insulation. And then you're out in the elements and it's cold. It sparks the regrowth of this Logano hair. So if a person is, struggling to survive and they're out in the elements long enough, their body can start to grow this hair all over themselves like a coat to survive. And that really kind of got my attention. And then when I got to looking, you see this same thing in the animal kingdom, because you can take a domesticated pig, and if it gets loose within a few months, that thing grows hair all over its body like a wild boar, and even grows tusks. It becomes a wild boar.
It sounds a lot like the Cain story, right? kind of a weird lineup, but it seems like it's almost line for line with the Cain story, which also gets into another weird context, because think about all of the connections with pigs and demons in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, but it was just really cool to go through and find, what does science say about the hairy man, and then finding all these historical figures and how it connects to Esau and the garments from the Garden of God. And there's just so many things that spouted off of this guy. And one thing I found that was really, really cool was this guy in history, and his name was Pedro Gonzalez. And he was from Spain, and he was a historically documented Bigfoot, wild man. And basically these guys found him, procured him, caught him, bought him, whatever. But these guys were in possession of this boy when he was 10 years old and gifted him to the King of France. It's like a toy or a collectible thing for like his birthday. And luckily for Pedro, this king loved him, for, like a son. Now it's a good picture of him right there too.
I was going to say, that's probably about the only one I could find of him, but yeah, it looks just like Wolfman, especially in that one.
Yeah, he's covered in hair, dude, from head to toe. And it says that this king loved him like a son and treated him like a son, gave him a position in court, sent him to the finest schools in France. He studied to be a lawyer, and he was well taken care of. And that when the king died, in his will, he gave him a piece of land, made him a lord, arranged a marriage with this girl named Elizabeth, and give him a castle, and did everything that he could to give Pedro as close to a normal life as he could have. And he ended up having, I think, 4 children with this Elizabeth, and 2 of them had this same condition. They were covered in hair from head to toe, and they're painted also. And they're little girls in pink dresses, but they're covered in hair just like their dad.
Actually, I think I have a picture of that
pretty
too.
Cool. And it says that they believe Beauty. Yeah, they believe that Beauty and the Beast was based off of this historical figure.
Dude, that's like a whole other layer that I haven't heard before, because I was kind of bringing it up here, but I'm sure you've heard the whole Zana of Abkhazia story, where it was from near Georgia, Russia, that they supposedly came across this Sasquatch woman, and the town, being of the time that it was, tried to like reproduce with her, and she ended up having a couple offspring that kind of had this in-between trait where they had like the strength and the size of this Sasquatch, or Alamasi as they were calling him in the region, but they had less hair. But the first, apparently 2 babies she ended up killing, because her first instinct was that she took them and put them in a cold river and plunged them. So she ended up killing the first 2 because they were linked with having that human DNA. But yeah, it's kind of weird. A lot of people don't want to believe in the existence of Sasquatch, but yet we have relatively modern and early 1900s modern cases of actual documented people that were, quote, Sasquatch or carried this genetic to some extent.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's fascinating. Like I said, I was never a Bigfoot enthusiast, but once I started looking into this and finding all the connective tissue, man, like I said at the beginning of the show, I am not a coincidence theorist. If I find the same story, same person on every single continent, through every single time frame of the world, there's something to it.
Dude, and yeah, like you were kind of saying, it's one of those things that it starts becoming undeniable when it comes to biblical context, when you start adding in all these other books and start connecting these storylines, because it seems like a lot of the information that's repressed anyways, like Sasquatch stuff, Dogman stuff, all of this weird paranormal type stuff, it's all explained within the Bible, but it's explained in the Bible only if you add the missing context. Like, it's such a weird thing to think that the whole world of things can be explained all within the Bible if you add these extra texts in and actually put things in the correct order. Like, it shows that it's almost like a puzzle, that people have purposely misconstrued and rearranged things purposefully so that modern day people aren't getting the same interpretation as ancient people that are reading this stuff.
Yeah, because knowledge is power. And if you believe in, this serpent seed, or what some historians and stuff refer to as the dragon court, and these theosophists and stuff, a lot of these people are your kings and queens and presidents and royalty, the people that are in control calling the shots. And they all, you got the Merovingians and all these different groups, they all claim to be in this line of the dragon court, and they think they have the divine right to rule. And yeah, knowledge is power, and they want to obstruct that knowledge as much as possible. That way they can still stay in the background and do as they please.
Inquiries of Our Reality will be right back after this brief commercial break, so stay tuned. And now back to the show. I mean, this is one of those things where when it comes to the Bible, I don't understand how anybody can try to interpret it through other people's perspectives. It's one of those things that it's like you kind of have to get all the pieces and kind of view your own interpretation, because you're not doing anything just if you're just going to church every day and hearing the same, or not every day, but every Sunday, and hearing the same things repeated week in, week out for 20 years, like you're not really learning anything. You're kind of just going through the motions at that point, and you're not connecting in all these weird aspects of things. Because in all fairness, man, if you're not talking about spiritual warfare and all these weird aspects in church, I feel like you're missing like a good 40 to 50% of the story here.
Yeah, there's so much more. I mean, Jesus is the foundation stone. I don't want anybody to get me wrong here, but there's so much more to the faith than Jesus. There's so much more story than you are loved. There's so much more to the story than you are forgiven. Now, those three things are foundational. You know, you need those first. But basically, this is one chapter of the story. There's still hundreds of chapters that you need to read and get familiar with. But it's like the modern day church, they just want to stay in that one chapter. And once they get to the last page, they flip back to the beginning of that first chapter. And it's like, okay, you've laid the foundation. Now it's time to spit that bottle out and wing yourself off of the milk and start getting some meat, because there's a lot of meat to be had, but you have to get out of that first chapter.
Dude, it's one of those things that if you're not actually diving into all of this stuff, like I said, you're not really doing everything just, because a lot of the time it seems like all this stuff kind of goes hand in hand. Like if you're going to have faith in the fact that there's God, there's faith in the fact that there's demons and all this different stuff, you got to take some faith in the fact that there are these other dark powers, there's these other different variations of evil things that exist. Because even looking at the hierarchy of heaven, like how many different types of angels are there? I mean, there's hundreds of different types of angels. So looking at the other realm of things, why wouldn't you assume that there wouldn't be the same for other things? And a lot of these topics that they purposely try to remove are the things that people kind of entryway into kind of having somewhat of a spiritual understanding. And if you don't take this stuff in, then you're losing a bunch of people that are collecting part of the story that's really important, but you're turning them away in the process. And I mean, part of the whole faith is that you're not supposed to turn away part of your flock. So if you're turning away part of your flock because they're really trying to understand and dive into these stories, then, you know, you're not leading your flock in the right direction as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and it's the most fertile ground too. You're missing the most fertile ground, because like we were saying, I think it was pre-roll, you know, all conspiracy leads to faith. And if you look at the conspiracy groups or the fringy groups, you know, or the supernatural, the cryptid groups, the alien groups, all these type of people, whether they realize it or not, they are searching for God. They're searching for meaning. They're searching for truth. So these people are already open to the supernatural and things like that. They're already seeking. So if you can get in there and talk about, you know, the textbook definition of aliens, which, you know, I view as angelic beings, rebellious sons of God. Yeah, those aliens, they're in your Bible. Bigfoot, oh, you like Bigfoot? Yeah, Bigfoot's in the Bible too. Vampires, oh yeah, I can show you some Nephilim giant clans known as the Blood Lickers. All of these fantastic things, magic, you know, all these type of things, they're in the Bible. And all these people that are going to the Bigfoot conferences, the alien conferences, the conspiracy conferences, we have the answers in our book. But so many people in our movement are relying on blind faith. They're stuck in their echo chambers, listening to the same pastor tell the same story over and over and over again. And they're not equipped. And if they were equipped, they could be going to these alien conferences. They could be going to these Bigfoot conferences or whatever, talking to people out in the wild that's into these things and searching these things out, and show them the real truth. They're already searching. They're already seeking. That is the most fertile ground you could ever have. It's easy pickings. So familiarize yourself with the Bible and all the things that's in it, because it's the, forget Game of Thrones, Daddy. The Bible has it all. It's more exciting than any comic book or Marvel movie you could watch if you read it with the right set of eyes and how they originally meant it to be.
Oh yeah, I can definitely agree with that, man. The Old Testament stuff is brutal, man. Everybody thinks about, Christianity as being this all everybody holds hands, everybody's happy faith, but the roots of everything, man, are bloody and gory, and people tend to forget those details. I was hearing something the other day that I thought was really interesting, since we're kind of talking about Bible stories, that something that kind of gets left out in a lot of the time when they're retelling the story of David and Goliath. The fact that he didn't only look for one smooth rock, he looked for 5 smooth rocks, because he knew that Goliath had 4 other brothers. So some details that are leaving out, that kind of just throws in a lot more to the story, that, you're trying to show that, it takes faith to take on this giant. Not only did he have faith to take on one giant, but he had the interpretation that he was going to end up taking on 4 others after the first one dropped.
Yeah, and when you get into the other stories, when it mentions the Goliath and his brothers and things like that, it alludes to them being giants also. It talked about the weaver's beam that one of the brothers handled. And I can't remember the exact weight now, but it was a ridiculous amount of weight that no normal man could hold. So it's showing you that a giant wielded this. But it said that they had 6 fingers. And you have all the 6-fingered Nephilim giant stories. And even you have hints of it in Hollywood. You remember back in the 80s, Princess Bride?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
My name is Tonio Montana, and you killed my father. I'm looking for the 6-fingered man.
Dude, talk about trying to portray a message differently. I mean, you were talking about Sasquatch earlier. We're always talking about these elites that are controlling Hollywood, all that type of stuff. They try to flip the script on the message. So, the whole demon aspect. Everybody thinks that a demon's going to come up to them. It's going to be this dark, scary, decrepit, evil-looking creature. But nobody ends up getting tricked by that. It's these charismatic, angelic-looking, beautiful type beings. Like, you get into the whole Lucifer concept, and he used to make music when he walked and all this stuff. Like, he's this clearly, beautiful, charismatic creature, and that's the only reason why people follow him. So they try to push everybody away from that. Even, the Sasquatch stuff, man. This is what I was kind of coming around to. They do stuff like Harry and the Hendersons, which, don't get me wrong, cult classic, everybody loves it. But you start looking into the roots behind it. There was actually some government push to actually make that movie, and then you get into, again, this whole idea of misconstruing messages. They try to flip Sasquatch into looking like he's just this happy tree creature that's running around in the woods. They try to make demons look like they're these evil things that are hiding in the dark. But the assumption is, whatever they're trying to portray, the actual message is the complete opposite. So Sasquatch out in the woods, probably a pretty brutal creature, even though they try to portray him as some happy vegetarian creature. Demons, not hiding in the dark. They're hiding in plain sight, and they're the charismatic ones that you're going to least expect, because that's how they work. The best trick that the devil ever did was convincing everybody that he didn't exist in the first place.
Yeah, and it even says that it talks about the beauty of Satan. And Jesus even said, beware, because even Satan betrays himself as an angel of light.
I mean, even everybody drops out the whole morning star detail, or the morning star detail too. I mean, clearly, again, this was this beautiful, charismatic creature. Never follow what they're trying to trick you into thinking, because this is something I always throw, with a lot of these new age, occult music artists. They also show this really, really dark message. They show all this, here's all this evil symbolism, follow the dark, follow this, follow that. But then at the same time, there's this flip where you have all this super duper happy, uplifting music, but then you start looking into the lyrics of it, and the lyrics of that stuff are more dark than the music that's portraying itself as darkness. So they're doing this thing where they're like, oh, here's the dark, here's the scary stuff over here. Some people are drawn to that, which of course is a whole other mind manipulation, but the people that are pushed away from that, they push into this other thing that they think is the light, but it's just as bad as the dark, because you're just not understanding the context of what you're actually singing, or what you're actually... Like perfect example, the Taylor Swift concerts, man. Everybody thinks Taylor Swift is just this uplifting pop star, but you look into all the weird aspects of it, and
she's a witch.
Clearly a witch. She's an occultist. People go to these concerts and they have these time blocks, so they don't remember what happened when everybody comes out on stage and they're chanting. They're tricking people away from this, thinking that this light, happy stuff is fine, but it's just as bad as the dark, man. Misdirection. That's what I'm getting around to here.
Yeah, whatever flavor you like, Satan's got your flavor, and he'll spin it any way to get you in the door and to get that ice cream cone in your hand.
Hold on tight, guys. This is our last break, so stay tuned. And we are back to the show, so let's hop right in. So I guess kind of starting to wrap up towards the end, man, and I would definitely love to go for another round because I think that there's a million different avenues we could go in, but this was definitely fun for a first-time conversation. But if there's any...
It was a good first date.
Oh, yeah, it was a great first date, man.
You treated me nice. You were a gentleman.
Are you interested in the second date? That's the question. But leaving the listeners with some words of wisdom. If there is any words of wisdom you want to bestow on them today, what might it be, man?
I guess I'll repeat, I guess what I'd said earlier about Les Brown and the story I always tell my kids. You are who you surround yourself with. So OQP, only quality people. You can be an eagle and run around with turkeys and forget how to fly and start clucking daddy. So only quality people.
Definitely agree with that, man. I actually ironically showed my kids this picture the other day. I'm sure you've probably seen it tossed around on Facebook and stuff, but there's like a brand new fresh strawberry right next to a rotted strawberry, and the mold and the rotting is starting to come onto the fresh strawberry. And it basically was showing that, what you keep around ends up tampering and altering what you are. So I completely agree with you there, man. But
yeah, Proverbs even says that's a biblical thing. It says bad company destroys good morals.
Ain't that the truth, man? And also, if anybody wanted to possibly come and pick up a copy of your book, check out all of the awesome research you've done. They want to come and check out your podcast because you clearly have a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about over there. Where can everybody come and get your book? Where can they get in contact with you? And where can they catch your podcast at, man?
Yeah, the podcast, anywhere you can consume content, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all those fine establishments, you just search up Prometheus Lens Podcast. The website, brand new website, matter of fact, got a mailing list. If you sign up for that, you get 30-day membership of ad-free listening experience and the first 3 chapters of my book. But that website is PrometheusLensPodcast.com. On there, you can find merch. You can purchase a book directly from me and get that thing autographed. I got some stickers and bookmarks that I send out with a purchase of the book, or you can just go to Amazon and find it if you just hell bent on giving Jeff Bezos some more money.
But man, I always recommend if you're going to get a book, you got to get it signed and you got to get it from the author himself. So don't give Jeff Bezos any more extra money because he definitely doesn't fucking need it because we don't need any more celebrities launched into fake space.
Bet, as the youngsters say.
And what are the other ones? 6'7". That's what my kids have been saying lately. I don't know what the fuck that means, but it's driving me batshit crazy.
Yeah. I would just, mine are teenagers now. I got one 18 and 16, and I would constantly just butcher all these, hip new sayings on purpose just to embarrass them and mess with them. I can't even remember now, but there were so many of them that I just totally just butchered on purpose in front of their friends to embarrass them. I mean, that's what dads are supposed to do. We're supposed to embarrass our children. Yeah,
like calling TikTok Tic Tac. I mean, no matter what, yeah. I know how it's said, but I'm always going to call it Tic Tac.
Oh, bussin'.
Bussin', there it is.
Their mother would cook something that they liked. They would be like, "Oh yeah, that spaghetti was bussin'," and so I'd always run around and be like, "Yeah, that's bustin', bro, bustin'."
Only dad humor, man.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm definitely looking forward to next time. We'll have to definitely make sure that there isn't a 4-year gap in between, and we get back around to it sooner rather than later, man.
Oh yeah, you impressed me. I'll let you take me out on a second date.
Ooh, special me.
If anyone would like to get in touch with me for any reason whatsoever, you guys can do so through email, which is inquiriesofourrealitypodcast@outlook.com, or through social media. Instagram and Facebook are the 2 that I'm the most active on. But you guys can also get a hold of me through the submission form, which is available up at the top of the link tree, and that'll go directly to my email. And the last way you guys can get a hold of me is through calling or texting the Bizarre Reality hotline. That number is 313-364-1551. And you guys can call or text that 24/7. If you guys happen to miss that number or any of the other contact information, all of it is available off of the link tree, which is available down in that show description. And with that, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Hope today's show has connected some dots in your own reality. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Have a good night, everybody.